Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them. Disappearance of David Lang. Now, around the world, people go missing every day. In America, lots of people go missing, never to be seen again. Theories of how they disappeared range from the simple, like self-exile, they're tired of their life and they just want to disappear, to the disturbing, such as kidnapping, murder and disposal, human trafficking, all the outright weird alien abduction and portals and things like that. But the vast majority of these disappearances are not witnessed per se. A person takes a walk or goes for a drive and is never seen again, for example. And it is extremely rare for a human being to simply disappear right in front of witnesses. But it does happen. Enter David Lang. On September 23rd, 1880, a farmer named David Lang was walking across a field toward a group of people. These people included his wife, their children, and a dozen or so friends. He was waving at them, and they all turned to wave back when right in front of them, he vanished into thin air. This wasn't, he fell into a pit, or he ran away, or, somebody kidnapped him in a wagon. It was 1880. He was walking along and boom, he was gone. He just disappeared right into thin air. The group was both frightened and perplexed. The area was searched for months, but no trace of him was ever found. Despite the tragedy, Mrs. Lang refused to move her family away until her husband was found. Yeah, it's one thing to say, my spouse was killed, so I'm going to hang out, or, my spouse left me, so I'm going to go find a better life, or whatever. I didn't like my spouse, I left him, that kind of thing. This was a whole different critter. How do you explain that? How do you cope with that? I don't know if there's a way to cope with that. So her and her family, her kids, they stayed there on the property. 7 months later, their young daughter was playing when she heard her father crying for help. This was 7 months later. She ran to search for him, but found nothing except a circle of dead grass in the spot where he had vanished. The girl screamed for her mother, but when the woman arrived, they could not hear David any longer. All they could see was a circle of dead grass. This frightened Mrs. Lang to the point where she finally moved her family to another town. Now, there's all kinds of different theories about this. Was there a portal in that field, maybe to another dimension? Some sort of a time vortex there that hits on random times or whatever. The circle of dead grass is, in my opinion, very relevant, because if you have the dead grass happens all the time. It comes from a lack of water, lack of, the grass dies off in the winter and comes back in the spring. It dies off in the fall, comes back in the spring, that kind of thing. So if there was a time slip, and this guy who, after 7 months, if he was still alive, he either jumped from one time to another in the same spot, and they heard him when he arrived, kind of thing, or he was getting food and water for 7 months. Something weird happened there. I would be interested to see paranormal investigators, what they find when they go there to investigate that area. In modern times, we have advanced sensing devices. We can detect electromagnetic anomalies. We can detect different radiation fields, that kind of thing. I would be very interested to find out where this happened and go there and try to do an actual scientific investigation to find out what happened. Because this wasn't... This was an unexplained thing that an entire group of people witnessed. Nobody can deny that it happened. You had a group of people, including the guy's family, and he disappeared into thin air right in front of them. That's talk about unexplained phenomena. Boom! This is the reason for a video called Unexplained Phenomena, right here. If we can't actually expend some resources and try to figure out what the hell happened to this guy, Who says it won't happen again? I'm gonna try to do some research for more people that disappeared and try to include some more of them if I can find some, because as I understand it, there was one where there was a farmer who had just gotten home and done it. I watched it. I want to say it was might have been David Paulides was telling the story, but I'd like to find out about that as well. The point I'm getting at is, if we don't find out what happened to this guy and how to stop it, it could happen to other people. And if people are just disappearing into thin air, that could be a serious issue. I mean, it's obviously serious for them and their families, but we're talking, if it becomes more prevalent, how many people go missing before you realize something's going on, before the authorities do something about it? He wasn't beamed up. He was still there 7 months later crying for help. This wasn't an alien abduction. They would have seen the spaceship, or they would have seen something. The man just disappeared into thin air. It's crazy. It's literally an unexplained phenomenon. Out-of-body experiences. At 2 a.m. on July 17th, 1957, Patricia Mann woke to see a shadowy figure that resembled her mother standing by the bed. The figure spoke, saying, "Come, I need your help," before vanishing. Convinced it was not a dream, she tried to phone her mom, but got a busy signal. She hurriedly dressed and drove to her mother's house, which was about 10 miles away. She found her mother lying in a pool of blood, clutching the phone in her hand. Later, in the emergency room, she found out that her mother had fallen and was desperately trying to phone Patricia for help when she blacked out. The fall had occurred at about 2 a.m., the same time she got the visitation by the shadowy figure, when she woke up. In another event, Richard Evans of St. Louis, Missouri, was crossing a busy intersection when a car roared around the corner and was about to hit him. In that instance, which seemed to last an eternity, his true quote-unquote soul body jumped out of his physical body and soared above the street. He witnessed his physical body being struck and sailing through the air. He witnessed an emergency worker showing up, including a doctor, and the doctor the doctor injected him with something. Whatever the substance was, it pulled Evans back into his body like he was on a rubber band. He was then, painfully aware that he had been struck by the car. So, it's, you take what you got when you get it, right? At any rate, if this type of event had happened once or twice throughout history, you could dismiss it. You could say, well, it was a hallucination or some kind of a derangement or whatever. But these are only two accounts of the hundreds of thousands of such accounts throughout history. A study in December of 2001 of 344 patients, I want to say it was in Denmark, these people had been successfully resuscitated after suffering cardiac arrest. And in that study, it showed that 18% of these people had recollections of what happened to them while they were clinically dead. I got this information from a book. Author Brad Steiger wrote a book called Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places. And the book is really great. You got to get it. It was published in, let me look. Hang on. Got to dig for these things. Hang on. 2003. Visible Ink Press. At any rate, he wrote this book called Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places, and oh my God, it is a fountain of information. You really need to get that book. If you like ghosts, that's the book for you. This guy's Brad Steiger is a great author, great writer. Pay attention to what he says. I got all this information out of this book, by the way. It's like one-stop shopping if you're researching ghosts. It's great. Anyway, in this book, he lists 7 categories of out-of-body experiences. And they're listed here as, number 1 is the projection of the soul while the subject is asleep. That seems to happen a lot. I don't know. For me, this is going to sound weird. I dream things that later come true, but I don't remember them until they do come through true. So it's almost like a deja vu. But I know it's not that I've experienced it in the past. It's that I know it was a dream. It came to me in a dream. I just didn't remember it until it happened. It's crazy. It's almost like a prophetic dream, except I can't remember it until it happens, which kind of defeats the point of a prophetic dream, you know? Anyway, number 2 is projection while the subject undergoes surgery, childbirth, tooth extraction, that kind of thing. I would imagine, excuse me, some sort of a sedative would be involved with that. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just showing you what I'm reading here. And this guy, Brad Steiger, he does a lot on this. So, you know, get his book. I can't push it enough. Honestly, he's really great. The third one is projection during an accident, when a subject receives a terrible physical jolt and his or her spirit seems literally thrown from the physical body. I have heard of those before, and that to me seems, I guess, logical. People see their lives flash before their eyes, or people leave the physical body, that kind of thing. Projections during intense physical pain. I hesitated to talk about this, but I knew a guy who, when I was in the Air Force, I served with a guy who had been in Vietnam. While he was there, he had undergone torture by the Viet Cong. He claimed to have had an out-of-body experience during the torture. I'm not going to name no names or anything because I can't, you know, actually corroborate any of it, but that's a story that I was told. So I can understand that. The fifth one is a projection during a high fever or severe illness. I can see that too. I've heard of that. I've seen it recanted in movies and things like that. I was watching an episode of MASH the other day. Klinger kind of sort of did the same thing, you know. There was a soldier in the same episode. He saw the soldier who was doing it, and Klinger had a high fever at the time. Projection during, number 6 is projection during pseudo-death, the near-death experience, essentially, wherein the subject dies for several minutes and may appear to a living recipient with whom they have an emotional link, or may travel to other dimensions of existence before being subsequently revived and restored to life. So I think this is kind of like that first one where Patricia Mann saw her mother standing by the bed. And I've seen other stories like that too. As a matter of fact, in MASH, during the Halloween thing, I think they recounted a story like that. So yeah, and I've heard other people say stuff like that too. I distinctly saw my brother, and I didn't know he had died. He was standing by the bed. I didn't know he had died until, you know, but he showed up and he smiled at me and blah, 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 that kind of thing. Number 7, the conscious out-of-body projection in which the subject deliberately seeks to free his or her spirit from the material body. I've heard of people like Hindus being able to get into a meditative state and project themselves astrally. That's what I think he's talking about here. And again, I cannot push this book enough. Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places by Brad Steiger. If you like ghost stories, buddy, this is for you. Let me tell you. Anyway, I'm going to get on with this video because it's running a little long. It seems to me, and this is going to sound weird because okay, well, not really. If you know my family, you know what I'm talking about. It seems to me that everyone I know either has a personal story like this, where they've seen somebody astrally projection, or where they themselves have done it, or they know somebody who does. This is a lot more common than people would like to admit. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's definitely something to this phenomena, and maybe we should all do some soul searching, because evidently our souls may very well be searching for something. We don't know. And I'm not saying you got to be uber religious. I'm saying there's something going on, whether you're religious or not. There's something going on, and it might behoove us to know about it. We've all heard stories throughout history and various mythology and virtually every culture on the planet of accounts of the wee folk, little people who arrive and cause mischief, abduct people, and sometimes lend a helping hand. In Scandinavia, they're sometimes called trolls. In Mexico, they're called Equals, Ihkals, Equals. In Malaysia, they're called Bunyans, Bunians, Bunyans. In the British Isles, they're called leprechauns and Slaymaith, Sleaghmaith, good folk. In France, they're called fays or fees, fairies, and fions. These little people are divided in basically historically into two groups, good and evil. Author Jenny Randles commented that the consistency between belief in such entities is truly remarkable. And the more I did research, oh my God, she's right. The little people essentially got around. The sightings and visitations of these entities, because I was originally, when I was doing this video, I started researching alien abductions and alien visitations and things like that. And I came across these stories, and oh my God, you gotta read them. They're ridiculous. The sightings and visitations of these entities were recorded in tomes of priests and scholars from centuries past, over thousands of years. When compared to each other, these events follow certain fixed patterns. And in the book Alien Agenda, the author Jim Marrs talks about this as well. I got a lot of the information from him as well, so keep that in mind. The appearance of the little people bears a striking resemblance to modern-day UFO occupants reported by witnesses. The methods of travel were very similar as well. The sudden appearance of strange circular houses at night, which contain strange lamps which use no fuel, which would later fly away. The entities which inhabit these strange houses had the ability to paralyze witnesses, transport them through time, and even take them away. Sometimes these entities would even hunt animals. I mean, okay, look at what you got here. Paralyzed witnesses. We get that all the time. Even in when they wake up, it's at night, and the dream paralysis, I think it's called, something like that. But they get that a lot as well. Transporting them through time. That's a lot like missing time, because if you have a visitation by one of these creatures, one of these entities, and then you lose 5 hours, it's the same thing as being transported through time. You see what I'm saying? Missing time. I did a video on that. Go check that out. And of course, there are some abductees who never return. So, and when they talk about these entities hunting animals, to me that reminds me a lot of the cattle mutilations and things like that. And which happens to more than just cattle. I'm just saying. Back in the day, before they had organized agriculture with livestock and like that, maybe they were hunting deer and elk and like that. You never know. This is there's a guy named Dr. Jacques Vallée. He's a UFO legend. I did a video about him. Check that out. He said that this is an age-old and worldwide myth that has shaped our belief structures, our scientific expectations, and our view of ourselves. To me, it's amazing how much the reports of modern-day UFO sightings, abductions, and alien encounters resemble the encounters of the little people of old. Perhaps these non-human entities are one and the same, and their visitations have been happening far longer than anyone would like to admit. I mean, honestly, who knows? And again, it would be one thing if this happened in one place, in one area of the world, on one continent. But this is literally all over the world, from Indonesia, Scandinavia, Mexico, Malaysia, Great Britain, the British Isles, France. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, I've even found some accounts from Africa. It's crazy. And they can't all be wrong, and they didn't have telephones to coordinate their quote-unquote hoaxes. So when people write about this kind of thing, you kind of got to, when a priest puts it in a book, you got to kind of take him at his word, especially when he's writing about crazy shit like this. You know what I'm saying? So when when these people from all around the world are reporting the exact same thing for thousands of years, you got to kind of put some weight behind it. I'm just saying. This could be a much bigger thing than people would like to admit. I'm talking about the immortal Count. There was a man who appeared out of nowhere in the mid-1700s and began attending parties in England. He was highly educated in philosophy, art, music, science, alchemy, and a score of other disciplines. He spoke a dozen languages fluently, claimed to be a European adventurer. He said that his name was the Count of Saint Germain, but he never outright divulged his origins. He was reported in London in 1743. He seemed to be drawn to political intrigue, and he never seemed to stay in one place for very long. The Count was arrested for espionage in England, but was released, whereupon he fled to France. There he made a laboratory for King Louis XV. The king paid him to make a laboratory, and he did. Gave him room and money and everything. Wherever this Count went, he was a charming ladies' man with a youthful appearance and claimed to be hundreds of years old. The Italian lover Casanova enjoyed listening to him, and the philosopher Voltaire wrote about his clever lies. Voltaire didn't dislike him, but he saw through him. You know what I'm saying? The Count of Saint Germain claimed a mastery over nature and universal medicine. He was said to be able to produce gold and diamonds on command, whenever he wanted to. He was rumored to be a member of the Illuminati, the Freemasons, a Templar Knight. He was rumored to have met Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, in Armenia in 1228, he claimed to have been Cartopolis, the man cursed by Jesus with immortality. People over the centuries have, which by the way would make sense because, anyway, people over the centuries have written about him and speculated that he sat at the court of King Arthur and witnessed the fall of Atlantis. Some people think he was an Atlantean. We don't know. He was evidently instrumental in the American victory during the Revolutionary War, and even gave, this is weird, they're saying that he even gave an impassioned plea for the founding fathers to sign the Declaration of Independence. I did a video on this called The Unknown Patriot. Go and check that out. I didn't know that they were talking about the Count of Saint Germain. I honestly, I had no idea. Apparently he was party to the plot to overthrow Tsar Peter III and replace him with Catherine the Great. He warned Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette that the French Revolution was coming for them. He admitted in 1784 that he was a deposed Transylvanian prince named Francis Rákóczi II. He was on his deathbed when he said that. But he didn't stay dead long. In 1785, he was in Germany with the hypnotist Anton Mesmer. That's where we get the term mesmerize. He popped up at the aftermath of the fall of the Bastille, where he was friendly with a French countess. He said that she saw him a number of times until 1820, and he never seemed to age. In the early 1800s, he assumed the identity of Major Fraser, and his battle tactics and strategies were legendary. He claimed to have interacted with the Emperor Nero and the Italian poet Dante. He became a key figure in numerous secret societies and philosophical groups, including Blavatsky's Theosophy practice. In 1904, Jacques of Saint Germain, bought an old mansion in New Orleans and began hosting lavish parties. Soon thereafter, a prostitute jumped from a second-floor balcony to escape. She told police that he had tried to drink her blood. When police searched his house, they found various vessels filled with blood and bloodstains everywhere. Saint Germain was nowhere to be found. There was no food in the house. Which begs the question: was this guy a vampire? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this was some of the inspiration for Mary Shelley's Dracula. I don't know. I know she took a lot of hers from Dracul, the Transylvanian lord, but this guy apparently was Transylvanian. What the hell? Maybe this guy was Dracul. I don't know. In case this is not proof enough of his immortality, sworn statements from the Countess von Georgi stated that she had heard the Count Saint Germain was in France, so she rushed to see an old friend. She had known him in Venice in 1710. She said that it was him, but he had not aged at all. If anything, he looked younger. He knew secrets that they had shared, and she was sure it was him. That's freaky. In the 1970s, a Frenchman named Richard Chamfrey performed alchemical tricks and claimed to be the Count of Saint Germain. This man reportedly committed suicide in 1983. But if he holds true to form, he'll resurface sometime in the near future. He has a following across the world, almost a religion. And it's crazy what these people do. It's a cult, basically. Whether he be alchemist, cursed Roman, Atlantean, or vampire, he is certainly an interesting figure, and definitely unexplained. The Palmer brothers. On June 4th, 1999, Michael Palmer, age 15, disappeared without a trace. He had attended a graduation party with some friends. The party was near the Meadow Lake subdivision outside Wasilla, which is 43 miles northeast of Anchorage. The boys rode their bicycles home at 4 a.m. According to his friends, Mike had had a few beers, but he was not intoxicated. According to them, he was not intoxicated. It was a long ride to the residence. I want to say something like 9 miles, where they were staying the night, and Mike lagged behind. His friends stopped at a convenience store to wait on him, but he never arrived. They assumed he had chosen to ride home, so they continued on. When Mike didn't come home by the next afternoon, he was reported missing at 3 p.m. Michael's bicycle was found in the Little Susitna River, and his sneakers were found near a private airstrip, which was 600 feet from the same river. That's the part that gets me. His sneakers were found near a private airstrip 600 feet from the river where his bicycle was found. So that tells me whatever happened in that area. The fact that there's a private airstrip, that, you got to kind of follow that lead. Was there any airplanes that took off from there? At any rate, 2 private investigators were hired to find Mike. One of them moved away due to threats on her life. The other one uncovered rumors that Mike had never left the party. So apparently, if these rumors are true, his friends lied. Anyway, the rumor said that he had been murdered or kidnapped at the party. And no evidence of any of these rumors surfaced, so, we got to take those with a kind of a grain of salt. But at any rate, the boy disappeared. He's 15 years old, and he disappeared, and his stuff was found near an airport. So, take from that what you will. The other boy, Charles Chucky Palmer, disappeared 11 years later. On April 10th, 2010, he disappeared. Michael's older brother was out riding snowmobiles with family and friends near Talkeetna, which is 70 miles north of Wasilla. All this is in Alaska, by the way. If you don't understand it, Anchorage is in Alaska. So, around 7 p.m., Chucky became separated from the rest of the group and was never seen again. They saw him riding a different direction away from them, from the direction they were headed, away from their cabin, and that's the last time anybody ever saw him. He was never seen again. Chucky's snowmobile was found in deep snow 12 miles from their cabin. Now, Chucky was 30 years old at the time. No footprints were found in the snow around his machine, which was puzzling. As a matter of fact, there were no clues or evidence that Chucky had ever been anywhere near the area where the snowmobile was found. That part is freaky as hell. If you've ever... if you have ever seen a thick, heavy snowfall, and you cannot go anywhere without making tracks, big, heavy, deep tracks. Oh my God, ridiculous tracks. Okay? Now, they said there had been a little bit of snow, but it would not have been enough to cover tracks like that. There was a huge search for both of these boys, for both of these guys. Fire Chief Ken Farina, when he was talking about the snowmobile incident, the fire chief, Ken Farina, who was involved in the search, said that the only explanation he could think of for Chucky's disappearance was an alien abduction. That's right from the fire chief. In case you're not aware, Alaska, they have what's called the Alaska Triangle, where people go missing. And Alaska is a huge, huge UFO hotspot. People go missing all the time. There's hundreds of different causes theorized, but the fact remains, people go missing. They actually had a TV series called Missing in Alaska. Okay, I watched a few episodes of it because I didn't like the people that were doing it. The professionals they called, I don't trust them very much. But the fact remains, there's a lot of people that disappear in Alaska. Now, literally anything could have happened to Michael. Given the scant clues and the rumors, I would imagine he was either murdered and his body hidden, or he was kidnapped and flown out from the airstrip. But honestly, who knows? There is no way to tell. When somebody disappears like that, and such scant clues exist, you really don't have anything to go on. Literally anything could have happened. As for Chucky, unless he intentionally wanted to disappear, I would lean toward the alien abduction. That theory. Now, keep in mind, this was in Alaska in the winter. The sound carries. People who were watching out for him would have been looking out the windows. They would have seen a light in the sky or anything like that. Alien, maybe not, but a human-made aircraft, definitely. So unless he had a small, silent helicopter, there's absolutely no way he would not have left tracks in the snow. Now, another angle to look at in both of these disappearances is the missing 911 thing. I did a video on this. Go check it out. This is eerily reminiscent of the types of stories related in David Paulides' books. As a matter of fact, I would not be surprised if both the Palmer brothers' disappearances were in David Paulides' books. Getting back to the private investigators for the first case, if the one private investigator was truthful and actually had been threatened before she fled the area, then to me that says there was foul play involved, or at least that someone in the area thought there was foul play involved, and they were trying to cover for the perpetrators. That's my brain working there. A 15-year-old at a graduation party consuming beer. Yeah, someone needed to go to jail for that. Teenagers in Alaska riding their bikes at 4 a.m. after drinking beer. Yeah, someone needed to go to jail. That's all I'm saying. I don't see how in the modern world, given the number of people who go missing, I can't see any parent allowing their child to do that. Now, Alaska is not the barren wilderness that people think it is. There are big cities. Civilization is there. There are vast stretches of unexplored wilderness, but there are massive cities. There are big cities. There are towns. It is in the modern world. It is American territory. America builds. That's what we do. Now, all that being said, if your kid is out alone at 4 in the morning or staying over at somebody's house or whatever, now as I understand that they snuck out to go to this party, so I'm not blaming the parents, but my contention here is if your kid wants to go out at 4 a.m. riding a bicycle in Alaska in the dead of winter, yeah, that's not happening. It shouldn't. As a parent, that should not happen. You should not allow that. You have the humans who can hurt your kid or kidnap him or whatever, which is what I think happened with this first kid. You have the unexplained disappearances that plague Alaska, and everybody knows about them, especially people in Alaska. Beyond all that, you have wild animals. There's bears there. There's grizzly bears. There's all kinds of stuff that could come out of the woods and get the kid. It's not a... People in Alaska are rugged individualistic people, and rightly so. I'm not knocking them. But if your 15-year-old kid if you don't know where your 15-year-old kid is in Alaska, yeah, you failed as a parent. That's all I'm saying. Now, these parents, the kid stayed over at a friend's house and they snuck out to go to this party. So you can't blame the parent here. But on general principles, if you have a 15-year-old kid in Alaska and you don't know where he is, yeah, you need to check yourself. That's all I'm saying. All right. I don't understand how the second kid could have disappeared without something paranormal going on. Either the missing 911 like David Paulides or an outright alien abduction. Because when the snowmobile you were riding is found and there's no tracks and deep snow all around it, yeah, that there's something weird there. The Martian child. A Russian child named, let me try to get his name right, Boriska Kiprianovich, made some startling claims. He claimed to be a Martian reborn into human form to begin a new life cycle. These claims would have been dismissed as a child's fantasy, except that Boriska seemed to know startling facts and astronomical knowledge that an 11-year-old kid could not know. Much of the information he provided is not generally known. Many of his facts are not in school science books and were unavailable to the child. Some have just recently been verified. Boriska calls himself, quote, the Indigo Child, and says he is here to save humanity from the same fate that befell the Martian race thousands of years ago, nuclear annihilation. He says that there are numerous clues that point towards the same outcome on Earth, but that it is preventable. He claims that he is here to relay that warning. And we get that a lot in the UFO community. People, UFO, I saw a UFO, the aliens took me on board and told me they're here to try to help us save the world. They're going to save us from, climate change or whatever the hell. We get that a lot. Now, the thing that got this that got me here, and I've done videos on this, there is evidence of nuclear weaponry having been used on Mars. There are background radiation signals that could come from no natural source. The only thing that we know of that would do that would be massive nuclear weaponry. Boriska Kiprianovich is a genius child. He held his own head up with no support at 2 weeks of age. He began speaking only at a few months old. He could read, draw, and paint when he was 18 months old. His nursery teachers were surprised at his incredible memory and writing and language talents. This is in nursery school. Researchers describe him as extremely shy with above average intelligence. I tend to think those researchers downplayed it a lot. This is the thing, you see this a lot in different fields. When a scientist is faced with something they can't explain, they downplay it. It becomes a hoax or a sham or somebody misunderstood this or that, mislabeled, whatever. We see that a lot, especially in archaeology, anthropology, the UFO community. all kinds of stuff. When a scientist is faced with something he can't explain, that in his mind can't be right, he tends to make it into a hoax or whatever. Oh no, that can't be real. That kind of thing. But these researchers described him as extremely shy with above average intelligence. If they were downplaying that, maybe the kid really was a genius. Who knows? Now, Boreska claims that the changes in humanity's fate would begin once the great Sphinx in Egypt had been opened through the mechanism behind its ears. Now, here's where the story got. I got to be honest with you. I got to play devil's advocate. This part of the story kind of got to me. The Sphinx is home to a number of tunnels and passages. There is a shaft at the top of the Sphinx's head. People claim to have found access tunnels to a cave system underneath the Sphinx. All that's been around for a long time. In 2022, archaeologists discovered a new secret chamber underneath the Sphinx. So we are still learning new stuff about the Sphinx. Okay? Here's where I got to play devil's advocate, though. The Sphinx is certainly a marvel of ancient engineering and may yet have many more secrets to offer up, but archaeologists have pored over the Sphinx for over a century. They have examined that thing left, right, up, down, inside out. They're bringing in ground penetrating radar. They're X-rays, you name it, anything they can do without actually damaging the structure of the thing. They're using to examine it. One would think that they would have noticed a mechanism behind its ears. That's all I'm saying. But who knows? Maybe it's hidden as well. Maybe it'll reveal itself when it wants to. Who knows? At any rate, this kid, Boreska, get his name right, Kiprianovich. Everybody deserves to have their name said right. Maybe he's on the up and up. Maybe he's real. He did know stuff that no kid should know. Maybe he's just... Maybe he's being serious. Maybe he's telling the truth. Who knows? The spirit on Mount Everest. Now, I had never even heard of this. I love stories about mountain climbing and things like that. I have never heard of this before until just the other day. It's an odd video. This is going to be an odd video. Many of mine are. I thought about including this in my historic haunting category, but instead I'm going to put it in the unexplained. After all, we don't really know if it's a ghost or not. Let me explain. For generations, mountaineers have been climbing Mount Everest. It's the holy grail of expeditions. Reaching the summit puts you in the elite circle of elite climbers. You can be a hell of a good climber and not reach the top of Mount Everest. It's just, it's like it literally is the holy grail of mountain climbing. Over the years, stories have come off of this mountain of climbers facing problems and receiving help from unlikely and unexplained sources. Some refer to this as the Everest Guardian, or Mount Everest's guardian spirit, guardian angel. Let me give you an example. In 1975, two British climbers named, let me get these names right, Dougal Haston and Doug Scott. They achieved their goal of reaching the summit of Mount Everest. Yes, they made it, right? They had succeeded where many had failed. The only problem was that they had reached the summit, the top of the mountain, too late in the day. They could not come back down before nightfall. That meant that they had to spend the night in the death zone. For those of you who don't know, the death zone is the area above 26,000 feet where the air is so thin that the body's cells start to die. Judgment becomes impaired. The air, because of how thin it is and how cold it is, it will kill you. Climbers can also experience heart attack, stroke, or severe altitude sickness in this area. The death zone is called the death zone for a reason. The pair had no oxygen tanks, no food, and their heater was dying. They were done. They knew it. They dug a hole in the snow and climbed in, hoping that their mutual body heat would help them last a bit longer. If they could last until dawn, maybe somebody could get them off the mountain. By all rights, they were dead men. But then, out of nowhere, they were joined in their hole by another person. This person had a warm body and a friendly presence. This person spoke to them, encouraging them and giving them tips on how to stay alive. These two men made it down off that mountain. They made it. There's no reason they should have survived, but they did. And both of them said the same thing. That they were joined by this presence. Now, nobody really knows what the spirit on Mount Everest is, but there are a great many climbers who owe their lives to it. And nobody can argue that, especially this particular case here, because there is no reason those men should be alive. They should be dead. But there you go. Those men walked down off that mountain. I'm just saying. If you have any more information, or if you know anything else, put it in the comments. I'll be glad to read it. Hope this finds everybody well. You folks have a good one. God bless one and all. There is a house in New Orleans where the monsters all hang out. When the police detective, who happens to be a skinwalker squirrel, uncovers a plot by a paranormal perpetrator, he has to enlist the aid of his fellow housemates. If you enjoy a modern, quirky take on historical mythology, check out my new original novel, The House Off Farago Road. Face peelers. Yeah. In recent months, villages in Peru and even a major city in Peru have reported attacks by armored beings who seem to be interested in removing their victims' faces. The world has come to believe these beings are aliens. The official story is that they are miners with jetpacks trying to scare off the locals. That's just ludicrous, but there you go. The locals have come to refer to these beings as face peelers after their legendary Pilacara, their boogeymen. I've done videos on the Peruvian aliens. Go check them out. I think I did 3 of them all told. And the story is just freaking weird. What's weirder is that the government is pushing this miners with jetpacks, gold miners with jetpacks, trying to scare off the locals. It's just idiocy. It's worse than swamp gas, folks. I'm just saying. Anyway, I thought I'd do a video on the face peelers because I had never heard of them before. And there's lots of places in South America that have some pretty weird stuff going on. And I've talked about some of it. I even did an unexplained place video on an entire country. So I want to say it was Brazil. Anyway, let me get started in this. In the Peruvian jungle, most people fear the Pilacara. In the Andes, it is known as Pishtaco, but most believe it is the same creature. They are tall, some have beards, and the majority of them are men. It is possible that Pilacara are some form of cryptid, but most of the local residents believe they are foreigners. Pilacara are said to creep up on unsuspecting children to abduct them and harvest them for their fat and organs, including, most notably, their faces. In more modern times, the bodies were found later with their stomachs opened, without their organs, and with wads of money stuffed inside. That's just fucking freaky. That is, oh my God, freaky. You find a body, it's opened up, all the organs are missing, the face is missing, but there's a wad of money stuck in the stomach. And here's the bad part. Many people did not report them to the authorities because of the money. That says something about the economy there, let me tell you. If you're willing to forego telling the authorities you found a body because of money stuffed inside it, yeah, there's something wrong. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with that. I'm just reporting what the story said, the research that I did. And it is freaking crazy. It was thought that the Pilacaras either paid or intimidated the authorities to look the other way. That's in recent times. And that being said, that means they're flesh and blood creatures. They're not, figments of their imagination or a legend or something. The locals fear the Pelikaras, even in so much as some carry firearms in case they are attacked. Now, these villages where the aliens are attacking, they're shooting these aliens, and apparently the aliens are armored. They can hear the rounds and the shot from their shotguns bouncing off of the metal. In modern times, one might suspect organ traffickers, but this legend goes back hundreds of years. So, I don't know what to tell you about that. That's fucking freaky. It is completely understandable why the locals who are being attacked by these armored beings would refer to them as face peelers. The similarities are striking. And in at least one case, a girl was injected with something that numbed her face, and they were trying to they started at her neck and they were trying to cut, but her brother showed up and scared the aliens off. Thank God. She's a teenage girl, Thank God for that. My question here would be, why are government officials covering for them with that stupid story about the miners with jetpacks? I don't get that. A government is supposed to exist to serve the people. At least here it does. In totalitarian regimes and tyrannies and like that, socialism, fascism, whatever, the government is all encompassing and the people serve the government. But that's not the way it is here. I don't know what it is in Peru, but the fact that the government came up with that stupid ass story, that raises more questions than gives answers. You know what I'm saying? It causes more questions than before. Maybe the aliens are paying them off. Who knows? At any rate, I hope I wanted to do this video on face peelers to clarify the situation, but damn, I don't know if it worked or not. Bowmen of Mons. On August 22nd and 23rd, 1914, the British Expeditionary Force in World War I occupied the small Belgian town of Mons. They were trying to repulse the quickly advancing German forces. The Germans outnumbered the British 3-1, and by all rights, the British had no chance. The best they could hope for was to delay the Germans so that the French could better prepare to defeat them. So they were fighting a delaying tactic, as it were. The British held the town for over 48 hours until they were outflanked and forced to retreat. This was a pivotal point in the First World War. What is not widely known is that to cover the retreat of the British Expeditionary Force, they may very well have had a little bit of help. An account was published in newspapers at the time of phantom bowmen alongside the spirit of St. George helping the British at Mons. Soldiers on both sides, British and Germans, saw a long line of humanoid shapes glowing in the moonlight, firing arrows at the Germans as the British retreated. Unconfirmed reports indicate that the Germans actually did report similar stories. Evidently, many of the British asked St. George for help, and St. George may have sent help in the form of longbowmen from Agincourt. One German field medic reported treating wounds which may have been inflicted by arrows. There were no arrows in the wounds, but he said they didn't look like bullet holes. They looked more like arrow wounds, puncture wounds. According to the witnesses, the phantom longbowmen stood resolute in the face of withering German fire and loosed flight after flight of arrows which decimated the front ranks of the German soldiers. The Germans could have easily wiped out the retreating British if they could have advanced. But because of the barrage of arrows, the Germans were forced to pause and take cover. If only one soldier had made this claim, then, he might be considered mentally unfit or, in his cups or whatever, drunk, on drugs, whatever. But when you have dozens of British soldiers and even more German soldiers all reporting the same thing, including medics, you kind of have to give it a little bit of consideration. I mean, I'm a veteran. I've spent time with people who were in firefights and who actually fought mostly in Vietnam, a couple of them in Korea. But the point being, when you're in a situation like that, the vast majority of soldiers, and I don't care what their religious beliefs were at the time, but when the thing started, at some point, the vast majority of them are going to find God. There is an old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. Now, that being said, I can absolutely believe that some of these British soldiers would be praying for help as they retreated, knowing they're putting their backs to the enemy, and the enemy can easily advance and kill them. Okay? When prayer is your only recourse, you pray a lot. I know that from personal experience on other issues. But that being said, who says prayer can't be answered? There's a lot of people in the world who believe prayers can be answered. And if that's the case, maybe St. George decided to lend a helping hand. Couple of squares of bowmen holding the Germans at bay while the British retreated. That could be effective. I could see that happening. I'm not saying this actually happened or not. I'm not jumping on the fence one way or the other. But my point is, we have reports of it. It was widely published in newspapers. I can see the upper echelons not knowing anything about it, because if you're a lower field officer and you get handed a stack of reports, after the fact reports, and you're reading through them and they're, well, okay, ghosts with bows helped us fight. I'm going to put that over there. I'm not going to send that up the line. You see what I'm saying? I can see that happening. But as I said, it was widely reported in newspapers, and to date, as far as I know, nobody's refuted it. So, on phone calls from beyond. I had kind of sort of heard about this for years, but I never really thought much about it because I didn't think it was that prevalent. Apparently it is. Bonnie McConnell got a phone call from an old friend. It was a Sunday evening, and the two spoke for quite a while. Bonnie's friend, Enid Johnson, explained that she had been moved into a nursing home. Since Bonnie had not seen Enid in over a year, she thought nothing of it. Bonnie promised to visit her the next day and bring a bottle of brandy with her. Enid responded by saying she had no need for such things anymore. Then the call abruptly ended. The next day, when Bonnie asked the receptionist at the nursing home which room Enid was in, she was informed that Enid Johnson had passed away and had been found the previous day on the Sunday morning. Yeah, she got the phone call on Sunday evening. If this had been a singular occurrence, one might think it was a hoax or some kind of a fluke. But this sort of thing happens far more often than any of us would care to admit. One such event took place in 1969. A young man got a phone call in a rented cottage from his father. He later found out that his father had passed away that evening at the exact same time as the phone call. He also discovered that the phone in the cottage was not hooked up in any way. It was just there for decoration. Yeah. Excuse me. Many famous people have experienced this phenomenon, from authors to actors to politicians. It seems that anyone can be susceptible to these phone calls at literally any time. Excuse me. Still getting over a cold, so bear with me. Then there's the case of Charles Peck. On September 12, 2008, a horrific train crash killed 25 people, including 49-year-old Charles Peck. The man died on impact, but searchers were sifting through rubble trying to find bodies for several days. During the first 11 hours after the crash, Charles Peck's phone dialed various loved ones 35 times. As a matter of fact, searchers used the phone location trace to find Charles Peck's body 12 hours after he had died. That's how they found his body, because they traced the phone, because it was making phone calls. Yeah, that's just crazy. Any way you want to look at it, unexplained phenomena exist, and many of these will never, ever be explained. When your phone rings next, who do you think is going to be on the other end? That's all the information I had for that, but I wanted to expand on that a little bit because it's a crazy phenomenon. It happens all the time. I have had relatives tell me that it happened, but I got to be honest with you, the relatives that told me this thing that I don't really, they tend to drink a lot and they're not uber reliable. We'll just call it that. But I'm going to have to go back and talk to them again because after doing the research on this and finding the sheer number of cases that are reported, I mean, you hear a lot of times. I woke up and my great grandfather was sitting on a bed and he had just died an hour before, that kind of thing. You hear that a lot. Matter of fact, I think I've done a video on that. But this thing about phone calls, especially the one in the cottage where the phone wasn't even hooked up, or the the one where the guy was in the train accident and dialed all that in the first 11 hours, so it was 35 times or whatever. See, stuff like that makes you wonder because there is more to life than the crude matter that makes up our body. I have long believed that. Human beings have a soul. I like to think that dogs and cats do as well. But I know human beings have a soul. That's my faith. I have faith that is true. And I dare say that nothing normal on earth can destroy a soul. You can kill a body, but all that does is free the soul. That's my personal belief. What does that soul do afterwards? Does it go directly to heaven, directly to hell? Does it hang out in limbo and become a ghost? I mean, who knows? Maybe they get an inch to talk to somebody. You never know. Maybe there's a message that they feel they need to deliver, so much so that God allows them to make a phone call. Who knows? Again, I'm not qualified to answer that, but these are questions that need to be asked because these phenomena exist. The unexplained phenomena that I talk about actually do exist. I do the research. I present the cases. It's up to you guys to decide. On Mal Ojo. Yeah, Mal Ojo. Um, if you're not from New Mexico, you probably won't know what that means. It's okay. Uh, the evil eye. The origins of the evil eye, Mal Ojo, is shrouded in antiquity. We know the Greek philosophers Plato, Plutarch, and others talk about the evil eye in their writings. They truly believed in this power, and many, many primitives did, but these guys were some of the most famous philosophers in history. They believed in it. The Mal Ojo I know of, I first heard about in the late 1980s. I had a friend, a tabletop role playing gamer, who was convinced that his aunt was a bruja and could give the evil eye curse. He called it the Ojo. I'd probably heard about it long before that, being born and raised in New Mexico, but I'd never really considered it in any real way until then. Talking to this guy, he believed. That dude was a believer. Okay, it wasn't for him. It wasn't make believe or a story or a wives' tale. This was a legend or whatever. This was real. This guy believed. He was absolutely convinced that his aunt could enact this curse, and because of that, he was very scared of her. Whenever his aunt was brought up, you could see it in his eyes. The dude was scared. Okay, and this was a big dude. He was a football player in high school. I mean, he was a big dude. He wasn't a wimp by any means. Uh, this guy avoided his aunt at almost any cost and crossed himself after he talked to her. And even when he talked about her, he would cross himself. Mal Ojo arrived in New Mexico from Spain in 1598. The ability to bestow the evil eye curse, it is said, is given to especially bad people who are favored by devils and demons. This is my understanding of the story. It is common for people to spit on a finger and make a sign of the cross on the forehead of a child or infant. This is to ward off the mal ojo. If you see somebody if you see somebody doing that to your baby, they're trying to do good. And now, whether you believe in that or not, I don't know. I'm just saying, they're in their mind, they're protecting the baby, and I've seen that happen multiple times. The effects of the evil eye include misfortune, serious injury, bad luck, and even death. In New Mexico lore, anyone can give the evil eye by intentionally and with belief wishing someone harm. Those given this ability by demons and devils can inflict much more dangerous mal ojo. However, anyone named Juan or Juana can cure the evil eye because they have powers naturally provided by the forces of good against evil. This idea may have come from John the Baptist for having baptized Jesus Christ the Nazarene. This belief is deeply rooted in Catholic dogma, so bear with us on that. I was raised Southern Baptist, so I hadn't really heard much about the evil eye. I mean, I had heard about it, but I didn't know what it was or anything until I talked to my friend who was sitting in on our games. And then I really heard about it, and I started doing some research, and I found out it's very widespread, very prevalent in New Mexico. My father-in-law talks about it sometimes. He's a Baptist minister. The evil eye curse is prevalent in many regions around the world, but for whatever reason, it seems more prevalent in New Mexico. In February of 1733, a court case involved a man named Melchor in conspiracy with several others, inflicting mal ojo on a couple named Garcia. The charges also involved an attempted peyote poisoning. According to the testimony of a witness, spells had been cast using idols. So there was some sort of magic going on there. Curanderas, women healers in New Mexico, have concocted medicinal potions and chants to remove illnesses, including mal ojo. Now, for those of you who have heard of a curandero, that is a Mexican male witch from Mexico. It's curandero is the male version, and they're evil from Mexico. The curandera are the good version. They're women from New Mexico. That's the only distinction I can find. It has been my firm belief all of my life that to be affected by any curse or dark magic, including mal ojo, one has to believe in it. Well, my friend certainly did. Now, I'm not belittling anyone's beliefs, mind you, and many of the curandera's healing arts are certainly documented to be effective, well documented. There is definitely something to the curandera's healing ability. I met my friend's aunt on 2 separate occasions. She seemed friendly enough. But I must admit, saying a prayer after we left her house, just to be sure. After all, you never know. So yeah, that's the mal ojo. A man named Rudolph Fentz, Fentz, Fentz. I read this story, and I had to do some more research. I read it actually a couple of weeks ago, and I had to do some more research, and I had to find some other articles on it because I try to verify all the stuff that I put up here, at least as well as I can. The older the story, the harder it is to verify because the fewer sources are available. Modern stuff, it's all over the news, But back then, this took place in 1950, so sometimes the older stuff is a little harder to verify. In 1950, law enforcement officers responded to a report of an automobile accident. A pedestrian had been hit by a taxicab in Times Square. The pedestrian was pronounced dead on the scene. Witnesses reported that the man had been acting strangely, gawking at buildings and cars and wandering around as though he was lost. He wore clothing from a bygone era. Upon examining the body, he was found to have coins and currency which had long been out of circulation, but was in pristine condition. Also, he possessed artifacts from businesses that had long ceased to exist in New York City. He had a brass slug from a saloon and a bill from a livery stable. a bill from a livery stable in 1950. He also had a letter postmarked 1876. Identification on the body showed that the man's name was Dr. Rudolph Fentz Sr., with a birth date in 1846. The home address on the envelope was from a building containing a business establishment. There was nobody living there. The ID showed that the man was 30 years old. There were no records for the doctor, and there were no matches for his fingerprints anywhere on file. Tags on his clothing were from a tailor shop unheard of, and his hat, the tag in his hat, was from a shop long closed down. Finally, the cop that was investigating the case found an old phone book and found that there was a listing for a Rudolph Fentz. This man was in his 60s and had passed away 5 years prior. The man's widow recounted a story wherein her husband's father had gone missing on an evening stroll in the 1870s. A missing persons report dated 1876 seemed to corroborate her story. It listed the missing man's clothing and description as identical to the clothing that the man that was killed in Times Square was wearing. This is crazy. This guy literally popped up in Times Square, New York, from 1876, and there's no explanation for it. Everything points that this story is real. Everything that the cop investigated proved the case. There is no question about it. I've done videos on time travel and time slips. I even did a video on a man who evidently time traveled in Ukraine. Go and check those videos out. I also did a video on portals, though that one primarily dealt with portals to other dimensions through which evil entities enter our world. Stuff like this intrigues me because there's so many things about our world we don't understand. Is it possible that there are temporal portals scattered through our world all over the place, apparently, and evidently people can't see them because they walk through them and they're like, "Holy crap, where am I at?" People unwittingly, innocent, unwitting people are displaced through time. So you go for a stroll one night and you're walking along, boom, you're there because you stepped through a portal you couldn't see, or is somebody doing this? Is it possible? Now, I've heard this claim made. I don't put a lot of stock in it, but I figure I'd mention it. Aliens abducted the guy back in the 1876 and then kept him for a long time and then dropped him off here in New York in 1950. That, again, I don't know. At this point, pretty much everything's on the table. The case of Rudolph Fentz seemed to suggest that there are portals through our world. Maybe they move. They're not stationary. Maybe they're malevolent. We don't know. Maybe they're natural. We don't know. But for whatever reason, people move through time unexpectedly. They don't know they're doing it. It's not intentional. It's not like they're mad scientists in the garage with a big machine. Oh, I will travel through time. No, none of that stuff. This guy went for a walk and ended up in Times Square. From 1876 to 1950. I mean, that's something like 74, 80 years, whatever, later. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. But here it is. This guy actually did it. The only thing they didn't have in 1950 was DNA. They could have tested it. But Grigory Rasputin. I want to do this guy's story for a long time. But I was trying to research a little bit about his past, and all the articles that I found, they all had conflicting information. So for the last few weeks, I've been sifting through the different articles trying to figure out what's common, finding commonalities. So I finally got something that I think I can put out. So here we go. Anyone who has ever heard of Rasputin has been fascinated with this story. There are thousands of tales, many of which are not supported by any kind of corroboration. However, the tales which are corroborated are so fantastical that one has to wonder how many of the others are true as well. All right. Grigory Rasputin was born in 1869 in the small Siberian village of Pokrovskoye. Pokrovskoye. My Russian pronunciation is atrocious, so bear with me. He was one of 8 children, but all the rest of his siblings died before they reached adulthood. He's the only one that made it to adulthood. He had little in the way of education. It was probable that he couldn't read or write. He was standard fare. There wasn't anything outstanding about his childhood. He was regularly imprisoned by the local authorities for a variety of offenses. He evidently liked to drink and carouse with women, and in the late 1800s, that was apparently a no-no. It wasn't like it is now. He was married at the age of 18, and he raised 3 children. So there's that. In 1897, at the age of 28, for some reason, and I literally found 22 conflicting reasons. Okay? He took a pilgrimage to the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkatoria. We know that. We know he did that. We just don't know why he did it. When he returned, he had gotten religion. Some say he was inflamed by religious fervor. Some say he was a charlatan. Some say he just wanted the status of being religious. We don't know. But apparently he got religious fervor. He was still carousing with women, but, anyway, he wandered Russia as a traveling holy man. He also developed his own religion based on an outlaw Christian sect called, they were known as the Khlysts, Khlyssts, Khlysts. His religious practices included orgies and self-flagellation. If you don't know what self-flagellation is, he took a whip and beat himself. Yeah. Keep in mind that he was infamous for never bathing. He acquired a multitude of followers and somehow developed certain abilities. Now, he had, according to the stories, he had lots of different abilities. He was a mystic. He could see the future. He could blah, 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 blah. He had like 100 different abilities. The two that are absolutely corroborated, documented, were that he could read minds and he could heal the sick. Those are documented. Now, how he did it, we don't know. But, again, documented. He developed connections in the Russian Orthodox Church, which eventually brought him to St. Petersburg. The people there, obsessed with the supernatural, welcomed him with open arms. He climbed the social ladder until in November of 1905 he went to meet Tsar Nicholas II, ruler of Russia. The ruling family welcomed him in. They were fascinated by him. They lavished him with gifts. He was it apparently for them. They were desperate for him to heal their son Alexei. Alexei suffered from hemophilia. Hemophilia is if you don't know what it is, it's a rare blood disorder. Your blood doesn't clot. So if you get a small cut, you can literally bleed to death because the blood doesn't clot and stop the wound. So a small paper cut you can literally bleed to death from that. Most people who had hemophilia back then, it was a death sentence. Today, it's hard to treat. People die from hemophilia every day in modern times. Back then, it was a death sentence. Alexei was also the sole male heir. They had a lot of daughters, but only one son. So there you go. Supposed to have an heir and a spare, and guess what? They couldn't get the spare part right. Rasputin, well, they had lots of daughters, and their daughters were wonderful. I'm not saying it was right. I'm saying that's the way they thought. I wasn't trying to, insult women or whatever. Not trying to be a sexist. Anyway, that's how they thought back then. The law said it had to be a male heir. So they kept trying until they finally got Alexei, and then he had hemophilia. So Rasputin was able to heal the boy with his spit. Yeah, he would spit on the boy to heal him. And inexplicably, it worked. Healing hemophilia is a serious thing. Again, even in our modern world, Rasputin did, in fact, have the gift of healing. It is documented. One such healing miracle took place while Rasputin was thousands of miles away. I don't know if he spit that far, but there you go. Even modern medical scholars cannot explain Rasputin's healing powers. Because of his healing powers with Alexei, Rasputin gained the unshakable and unquestioning favor, can't read my own writing, of the Tsar and his family. In order to ensure his future, Rasputin made a bold prediction. He told the Tsar that his fate was linked to the Romanovs. That's the Tsar Nicholas is the Romanov family. If he basically what he told him was that if he were to die, the Romanovs would soon follow. So they were anxious to keep that dude alive. Rasputin was named by Tsar Nicholas II, Patriarch of the Romanov line, as his official lamplighter, which is sort of a household religious icon. Rasputin took full advantage, eventually even advising the Tsar on matters of state. He was also accepting sexual favors and other bribes for influencing the Tsar. Yeah. He was also accused of rape multiple times, but his accusers were either fired or ignored. The guy was literally untouchable. The Tsar made him untouchable, okay? Because they liked him so much. Now, in all fairness to the Tsar and his family, the Romanovs, he healed their son. There's no question about that. So, yeah, I can see them liking him to the point of wanting to keep him around. I get that. Several members, I think they may have went a little overboard though. Several members of the Orthodox Church named him a heretic, and the Prime Minister tried to have him exiled. The Russian secret police opened an investigation. Still, he maintained his position. At one point, he was stabbed in the stomach by a woman, a peasant, who claimed he was the Antichrist. He escaped on foot, slipped into a coma, but soon recovered. Yeah, in the early 1900s, if you get stabbed in the stomach, chances are you're dead. Period. I mean, the chances of this woman missing vital organs by stabbing him in the stomach is, oh my God, ridiculous. I mean, he should have died from that. He did slip into a coma, but he soon recovered. When Tsar Nicholas left the capital to personally lead his troops in World War I, Rasputin took full advantage of his wife. He manipulated her at will on matters of state and also wormed his way into her bed. Yeah. I guess it's good to be the favorite of the king. I don't know. In December of 1916, a group of Russian noblemen had had enough. They invited him to an out-of-the-way place where they gave him cakes laced with cyanide. He ate several of the cakes, but seemed fine. Then they gave him wine laced with cyanide. 3 glasses later, he seemed fine. Becoming irritated that Rasputin wouldn't die, one of the nobles pulled out a pistol and shot him in the chest. One of the conspirators, and he dropped, right? So one of the conspirators took all of his clothing, they undressed him, and the guy took his clothes, and he went back to Rasputin's home to make it look like he'd returned home from the meeting. While the conspirators were trying to dispose of the corpse, Rasputin stood up and punched one of them in the face. So now you have naked Rasputin running around chasing the nobles. So they pulled out their guns and they shot him at least 3 more times and at least once in the head. Okay? So so they dumped his body into an icy river. He was still moving as he sank into the freezing water. His body was found the next day, stuck to the ice like he was trying to escape the icy river. His eyes were open. One hand was on the ice. The other hand was a fist like he was banging on the ice. Again, what do you got to do to kill a dude, you know? I mean, one would think cyanide would do it, but no, apparently not. So they shot him, and then they shot him, and then they shot him, and finally shot him in the head. And he was still alive. I mean, what do you got to do, right? In 1917, as per the prediction, the Tsar was ousted and the Romanovs were murdered. So, kook or not, his prediction did come true. Rasputin is one of the most fascinating characters in history. Very little is known about him because obviously, you know, he was in Russia. But the fact that this guy had documented healing powers and it was documented that he could read minds, that tells you something. There was something to this guy.